The summer air was thick with laughter and grill smoke as Judith Keller stood quietly near the edge of the Fitzgeralds' backyard, watching neighborhood children chase each other around balloons and folding chairs. The Fitzgeralds had invited everyone in the cul-de-sac to celebrate their grandson's 9th birthday, and it was the kind of New Hampshire gathering Judith used to enjoy, before her life changed forever. Judith was 64 now. Time had softened her shoulders and left streaks of silver in her once dark hair, but her eyes remained sharp, always searching. Her husband, Hank, stood beside the gazebo chatting with Mr. Fitzgerald over a tray of burgers. The late June sun poured gold across the party, casting long shadows across the kids tumbling through the grass. Then it happened. Judith had just nodded politely at something Mrs. Duffy said about hydrangeas when a boy darted out from the house, laughing, chasing a balloon. He couldn't have been more than 8. But it wasn't his face that made Judith's breath catch in her throat. It was the clothes. Green plaid overalls with mustard yellow straps. A long-sleeved white Henley underneath. His dark curls bouncing with each step. Judith's heart stuttered. That outfit. That exact outfit had once belonged to her boys, Eli, Jonah, and Miles. The last time she'd seen them, the morning of August 12, 1993, 2 of them had been wearing that very outfit. She never forgot. How could she? The color drained from her face as she took an unsteady step forward. Without thinking, she crossed the lawn and gently grabbed the boy's shoulder. "Where did you get those clothes?" Her voice trembled, barely audible over the party music. The boy startled, twisting away. "Dad, that lady grabbed me." Heads turned. Conversations stopped. A man, tall, mid-30s, in a Patriots cap, hurried over and placed his arm protectively around his son. "Ma'am, what's going on?" Judith, flustered, took a step back. I didn't mean to frighten him. His outfit, it just looked exactly like." She trailed off, voice cracking. The man frowned. "Look, lady, I don't know what you're talking about, but you scared my kid." Hank rushed to her side, gripping her elbow. "Judith, honey, what's wrong?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the overalls. The man softened slightly when Hank explained. "Our sons went missing 30 years ago. Triplets. 2 of them wore outfits just like that the day they disappeared." It hit her hard. A hush fell across the party. Mrs. Fitzgerald stepped forward and nodded solemnly. "It's true." Judith's boys, 3 of the sweetest children this town ever knew, vanished from their front yard in 1993. No trace. No answers. The man's face shifted, guilt and confusion mingling. "I'm so sorry. We bought this at a thrift shop in Nashua a few months ago. I didn't mean any harm." Judith reached out once more, gently touching the hem of the overalls. "I know it sounds crazy," she whispered, "but I just need to see if it's the same brand." The man hesitated, then slowly unfastened one of the buttons. "It says Belden Mill Wear," he murmured. Judith staggered back. "That's it," she said, voice hollow. "That's the same brand." It was a small label out of Vermont. They stopped making kids' clothes in '94. Hank placed his hands on her shoulders. "Judith, sweetheart, let's go home. You need to rest." She didn't argue. Her hands were shaking too much to speak. As they walked the few blocks back to their house, she kept glancing over her shoulder, at the boy, at the overalls, at the past that had just stepped into her present. Back home, Hank helped her onto the couch and brought her chamomile tea. Judith stared blankly at the living room wall, then whispered, "Hank, I want to see the photos again. The ones from that summer." He looked surprised. "They're in the cedar chest. We haven't opened that in over 20 years." "I know, but I need to. Please." Reluctantly, Hank retrieved the wooden chest from the attic. Dust motes danced in the air as he pried it open. Together, they pulled out scrapbooks, baby clothes, and finally, a red leather photo album. Judith flipped to a picture dated August 12, 1993. There they were. Eli, Jonah, and Miles, arms around each other in front of the house, wearing the overalls. Except, Judith leaned in. "Wait, Hank, look behind them. That car." Hank squinted. Is that? A silver Oldsmobile Cutlass, Judith finished. That was Mr. Dempsey's car. Dempsey? Our neighbor who moved away 2 days after the boys disappeared. Judith's hands trembled as she traced the shape of the car. Why would his car be parked there that morning? He said he was in Maine. They stared at the photo, hearts pounding. What if Mr. Dempsey never left town? What if he saw something that day? What if he had something to hide? And that's when Judith's eyes caught one more detail in the photo, a reflection in the car's side mirror. A dark figure, a shape, a shadow that shouldn't be there. She slowly turned to Hank. We have to find him, Hank, she said, her voice steady for the first time all day. We have to find Mr. Dempsey. Judith barely slept that night. The image of the Oldsmobile Cutlass haunted her. Not the car itself, but that eerie shape in the mirror. A presence, a figure, faceless, blurry, but unmistakably there. She stared at the photograph for hours, rotating it under lamplight, taking notes like a detective lost in her own living room. By sunrise, she had made up her mind. I'm going to find Glenn Dempsey, she told Hank over black coffee. He looked up slowly from his bowl of oatmeal. Judith, that man moved out the day after our boys disappeared. 30 years ago. You really think he's still in New Hampshire? I think someone like Glenn doesn't just vanish. Not without a reason. Hank didn't argue. He understood this wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, a mother's instinct sharpening like a blade after 3 decades of rust. She pulled out her laptop and began searching. Glenn Dempsey had once been the quiet man in the faded blue baseball cap who lived 3 doors down. A widower in his 40s back then, he worked maintenance at the Merrimack County School District, but never talked much. He kept to himself. No children, no pets, no hobbies, unless you counted polishing that silver cutlass on Saturday mornings. Judith remembered her boys used to wave to him, and he'd smile, just a little. Then he was gone. After the disappearance of the triplets, Glenn claimed he had a family emergency in Maine. Packed up overnight. Told neighbors he was relocating. Judith hadn't thought much of it then. Everyone was grieving, searching. But now, that car in the photo said otherwise. A quick search of public records yielded a hit. Glenn Dempsey, 73, retired, now living in Milford, New Hampshire. Only an hour away. Judith turned the screen to Hank. I need to talk to him. Hank hesitated. Then we'll go together. They arrived in Milford by mid-morning. It was a quiet town tucked between rolling hills and forest. The address led them to a modest white duplex near the edge of a pine grove. Wind chimes tinkled above the front door, and a weathered lawn chair sat on the porch. The cutlass wasn't there, but the mailbox bore the same name, Dempsey. Judith's heart pounded as they walked up the short path. Hank rang the bell. Footsteps inside. Then the door creaked open. An older man with a thick gray beard and sunken eyes stood in the doorway. He squinted at them for a second too long. Yes. Mr. Dempsey, Judith said softly. My name is Judith Keller. My sons, Eli, Jonah, and Miles, went missing in 1993. We were neighbors in Maple Hollow. You lived 3 doors down from us. The man went still. His eyes darted between them. Yes, I remember you. We were looking through some old photos yesterday, she continued, reaching into her bag. This one was taken the morning the boys disappeared. She handed him the photograph. He took it reluctantly. The edges trembled in his grip. I think your car was in the background, Judith said, voice gentle but unflinching. You told the police you'd already left town. But this photo was developed 2 days after they vanished. And we think it shows someone reflected in your car's side mirror. Glenn Dempsey didn't speak. The silence stretched so long Hank was about to say something, but then the old man spoke. I remember that day, Glenn said quietly. I remember it too well. He stepped aside. Come in. The living room smelled of pipe tobacco and lemon polish. Books stacked in corners. A fire gently crackled in the hearth, even though it was 70 degrees outside. I lied, Glenn said, lowering himself into a creaking recliner. I told the police I'd left for Maine the night before, but I was still there the morning the boys disappeared. Judith froze. Why? Hank asked. Why lie about something like that? Glenn's eyes drifted to the window. Because I saw something, and I was afraid. Judith leaned forward. What did you see? The old man took a deep breath. Your boys were playing outside, just like always. I'd come out to polish the cutlass. I was watching them, smiling. Then a red station wagon pulled up near your curb. Not parked, just idling. Judith's hands gripped the arms of her chair. Glenn continued. Out came a man, mid-30s, tall, light brown hair, sunglasses. He walked up to your boys. I couldn't hear the words, but they weren't scared. He handed something to Eli. Looked like a toy. Then he motioned for them to follow. He swallowed hard. They went. All three of them climbed into that car. I stood there, stunned. I kept thinking, maybe they know him. Maybe he's a family friend. But something felt wrong. Why didn't you call the police? Hank asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. Glenn looked down. Because the man looked straight at me as he drove away. He paused and smiled. A cold wave passed through the room. I panicked, Glenn whispered. I was already packing to leave for Maine that weekend. When the news broke, I told myself maybe the boys had wandered off. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. I didn't want to be dragged into something. So I lied. Judith's hands were trembling now. Do you remember the license plate? No, he said. But I remember a bumper sticker. It said, Haven Harvest, planting roots in young lives. Judith and Hank exchanged a look. That's it, Judith said. That's the name of the place we just saw on that flyer yesterday. That youth farm in Somersworth. Glenn looked confused. What is it? A charity farm for kids, Hank explained. They say they take in orphaned immigrant children, but it's in the exact area where this car was seen later on. We just visited it 2 months ago. Glenn's eyes widened. That's not a coincidence. Judith stood up slowly, the photo still clenched in her hand. This man, whoever he was, he might not have been a stranger at all. He might have had everything planned. And if that farm is connected, Hank said grimly, then someone needs to know. Judith turned back to Glenn. I appreciate your honesty. I do. But you need to call the police. Today. Glenn nodded. I will. I promise. Judith and Hank left the house, hearts pounding, minds racing. They didn't speak until they reached the car. As they pulled out of the driveway, Judith clutched the photo against her chest. I know what we have to do next, she whispered. What? Hank asked. We go to Haven Harvest. She looked out the window as the sun broke through the clouds. And we find out who's really running that place. The GPS chimed, arrived at destination. Judith and Hank pulled off the rural road onto a gravel path surrounded by rolling fields and white fences. A wooden sign stood at the entrance, sun-faded and swinging gently in the wind. Haven Harvest, planting roots in young lives. Beyond the sign stretched a vast property. Several barns, greenhouses, and cabins spread across acres of land. Children played in the distance under the supervision of a few adults. On the surface, it looked peaceful. Idyllic even. But Judith had learned long ago that the most dangerous places were often the ones wrapped in kindness and silence. They parked beside a weathered farmhouse and walked up to the front porch. A tall woman with graying hair greeted them. She wore a Haven Harvest t-shirt and smiled as they approached. Welcome. Are you here to volunteer? Hank glanced at Judith, who replied with steady calm. We're looking for information. We used to live in Maple Hollow. Our boys went missing in '93. We recently discovered a photo that may link someone to this place. The woman's smile faded slightly but remained cordial. I'm sorry to hear that. We don't get many visitors from that far out. Why don't you come in? They entered a cozy office with handmade crafts and photos of children pinned to the walls. She introduced herself as Eliza Monroe, director of the farm. Judith placed the photograph on the desk. This car was parked outside our home the day the boys disappeared. A man was seen leading them into a red station wagon. That car had a bumper sticker from your organization. Eliza's brows furrowed. I don't know how that could be. Haven Harvest was founded in 1996. Judith blinked. Are you sure? Positive, Eliza said, now more guarded. We opened our doors 3 years after your sons went missing. Before that, this land belonged to a private church group, the Children's Garden Fellowship. They ran a youth boarding home here, but they disbanded in '95. Judith leaned forward. Is there a way to contact anyone from that group, or access records from that time? Eliza shook her head slowly. I'm afraid most of those files were destroyed in a fire. Some of the older volunteers may know a bit, but they don't work here anymore. Judith felt her hope flicker, but then Eliza hesitated. Wait, there was one man. He worked here when we took over. Stayed on for a couple years. Helped transition the property. Quiet guy. Wore sunglasses all the time. Judith froze. Do you remember his name? Eliza tapped her chin. Tobias. Tobias Lind. He didn't say much. Just worked maintenance. Lived in the caretaker's cabin at the edge of the woods. One day he just stopped showing up. She stood and went to a drawer. Let me check something. Moments later, she returned with a yellowed personnel file. Here. He left no forwarding address, but signed in for his last shift on October 11, 2002. Judith's hands trembled slightly as she scanned the document. Tobias Lind. The name meant nothing to her, but something about it felt off. Eliza added, we found the cabin padlocked a week later. Looked like he left in a hurry. Is it still there? Hank asked. Eliza looked toward the window. Yes, but no one's lived in it since. You're welcome to look if you'd like. They made their way down a wooded path behind the barn. After 10 minutes of walking, they came to a clearing. A small, weathered cabin stood in the shade of tall pines. The door was sealed with rusted chains and a heavy padlock. This looks like it's been untouched for years, Hank murmured. Judith stepped closer. He lived here and just disappeared? She circled the cabin, peeking into a cracked window, and then she gasped. What is it? Hank ran to her side. Inside, the room was covered in dust, but on the back wall, barely visible through the grime, was a hand-drawn mural. 3 children stood hand in hand. 3 boys, each one with curly dark hair and similar features. Judith choked. That's them. That's my boys. Hank's face paled. My God. Judith stumbled back from the cabin. Her heart raced. Her head swam with possibilities. Terror and hope twisted into a single breath. What does this mean? She whispered. I don't know, Hank said. But whoever this Tobias Lind is, he knew them. He saw them. Suddenly, Eliza's voice rang out behind them. I just remembered something else. They turned. When we moved in, one of the volunteers found an old Game Boy in that cabin. A teal one with faded stickers. Judith's legs went weak. Eli had a teal Game Boy. Hank caught her. Do you still have it? Eliza shook her head. We donated old items to local shelters years ago. Judith's voice dropped to a whisper. No, we just saw it. What? Eliza asked. Judith turned slowly to Hank. Remember the yard sale last month? I told you I saw one just like it, with the Pokemon stickers. We brushed it off. Oh God, Hank muttered. Judith's eyes locked onto the mural again. They're still out there. Judith stared at the mural through the dirty windowpane, her fingertips pressed against the glass. The three boys were crudely drawn, but the detail was unmistakable. The height differences, the same curly hair, the little scar on Eli's cheek. It wasn't just a guess. It was them. "What kind of person draws children on a wall and then vanishes into the woods?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Hank gently touched her shoulder. "Someone who wanted to remember them." Judith stepped back, chest tightening. "Or someone who took them." Behind them, Eliza's voice was uneasy. "I didn't know this was here. We never came this deep. Most of the newer staff don't even know this cabin exists. You should talk to someone. Police, maybe." Judith turned to her, a new resolve hardening in her eyes. "We will. But first, I want to know where that Game Boy went." Back in their car, Judith called the only number she had from that day at the yard sale, Mrs. Rucker, the woman who'd hosted it in Pine Hollow. Her voice on the phone was friendly but confused. "Oh yes, I remember you. The woman who looked at the Game Boy and froze like she saw a ghost." Judith's voice was tense. "Do you still have it?" There was a pause. "I sold it. Some teenage girl bought it for $5, said she liked retro stuff. She had green braids and a shirt that said Grief is a Garden. I think she said she lived off Baxter Avenue." Judith scribbled the address. "Thank you. Please, if you remember anything else, call me back." That night, she and Hank drove through Pine Hollow's backstreets until they found a mural of wildflowers sprayed across a building wall. At the door of a small, brick row house, a teenage girl opened with a quizzical look. She had green braids and a t-shirt that read exactly what Mrs. Rucker had described. "Can I help you?" Judith held up her phone, which showed a picture of Eli's Game Boy from a family album. The girl's eyes widened. "That's mine. I bought it at a garage sale." Judith tried to steady her breath. "May we see it? Please. It belonged to my son. He disappeared when he was 8. The girl stepped back, expression softening. "Sure. Wait here." Moments later, she returned with the same teal Game Boy. Judith took it in shaking hands, tracing the peeling Pokemon stickers and faint initials scratched on the side. E.D. Eli Daniels. "This is his," she whispered. Hank stared in disbelief. "After all these years." Judith turned to the girl. "Did it have anything inside? A cartridge, a note, anything?" The girl frowned. "Actually, yeah. There was a game in it, but when I tried to play it, it was broken, just static. I opened the cartridge, and there was something weird inside." "Weird how? Like, not a game chip, a folded paper or something?" Judith's eyes widened. "Do you still have it?" "I think I threw it in a box. Hang on." She disappeared again, and returned moments later holding a clear bag. Inside was a worn piece of paper, folded small and sealed with clear tape. Judith's fingers trembled as she carefully opened it. Inside was a note, written in shaky, childish handwriting. "My name is Eli. If you find this, please help us. We're in a place with a white barn and a bell. There's woods behind it. My brother Jake hurt his arm, but we're okay. Don't tell the man in the red coat. He watches us at night." The room fell silent. The only sound was Judith's ragged breathing. "Oh my God," she whispered. Hank took the note gently. They were alive, long after that day. The girl blinked. "Do you think they're still?" "We don't know," Hank said. But Judith's eyes blazed with determination. "We're going back to Haven Harvest." The next morning, they returned to the farm, this time with backup. Detective Callahan, the same officer who once dismissed them as grieving parents chasing ghosts, stood beside them with a team. He looked at Judith with a furrowed brow. "You really think there's something under that property?" She handed him the note. He read it, face going pale. "This changes everything," he muttered. With Eliza's reluctant approval, they returned to the overgrown path that led to the caretaker's cabin. Armed with gloves and tools, the team began searching the surrounding woods. They moved slowly, combing the perimeter, looking for signs. Then, a young officer called out, "Over here." They all rushed to his side. Partially buried in dirt and roots, barely visible beneath leaves, was a rusty old bicycle wheel. And just beyond it, a small trapdoor covered in ivy and moss. Judith's heart stopped. Callahan looked at the others. Shovels. Now. They dug. The trapdoor creaked as it opened, releasing a cold rush of air from beneath the ground. A narrow staircase spiraled into darkness. "No way this was part of the farm's plans," one officer muttered. Callahan turned to Judith and Hank. "You two stay here. We'll go in." They nodded, clutching each other's hands tightly. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 15. Finally, one officer climbed back out. His face was pale. "There's a whole room down there. Makeshift beds. Toys. Old food cans. It looks like someone was keeping kids down there." Judith's legs buckled. Callahan exhaled. "And there's something else." "What?" Hank asked. "There's writing on the wall. Scratched in with a nail or something." He swallowed hard. "It says, Jake was here. Eli was too. We'll find you, Mom." Judith collapsed into tears. The trapdoor remained open, a gaping wound in the earth beneath the forgotten farm. Judith stood frozen, the words, "Jake was here. Eli was too. We'll find you, Mom," echoing in her chest like a heartbeat finally returning after 10 years of silence. Detective Callahan crouched by the edge of the hatch. "We've secured the site. There's more." A second door deeper in the tunnel. "It's been barricaded." "Barricaded?" Hank asked. Callahan nodded. "From the inside." Judith couldn't speak. Her legs carried her numbly toward the edge, peering into the gloom. Officers were still down there, shining flashlights through the dim corridor. The air reeked of damp wood, dust, and something faintly metallic. Minutes later, the team resurfaced. In their hands were bags of evidence, tattered children's clothes, drawings on lined notebook paper, and an old, cracked flashlight with JD scratched on the handle. One officer held up something else, a child's shoe, no bigger than a tennis ball. Judith reached for Hank, gripping his arm for balance. Callahan knelt beside them. "Judith, Hank, we believe the boys were kept here for some time. It's hard to say how long, but based on food cans we found, some dated as late as 2019, they were alive well after they disappeared in 2015. Judith blinked. "But where did they go after that?" "That's what we're working on now," Callahan said. "And there's something more." He pulled out a worn, grainy Polaroid photo from an evidence bag. It showed two young boys, sitting side by side on a mattress in what looked like the room below. One had his arm in a makeshift sling. Both were thin but alert. Eli and Jake. Judith pressed the photo to her chest, breaking into sobs. "That picture, it's them." Callahan's expression hardened. "Now we need to figure out who took it." That evening, the local news lit up with the story. Underground bunker found at Haven Harvest Farm. Missing children may have been held. People from Pine Hollow began calling in with tips. One name came up more than once. Raymond Collier, an eccentric groundskeeper, retired military. He had worked on the property for nearly a decade before disappearing suddenly 2 years ago. "I remember him," Eliza said when questioned. "He always wore that red parka. Creeped everyone out. Talked to himself a lot. But he fixed everything. Pipes, fences, lighting." Red parka. Judith's heart jumped. The note in the Game Boy. "Don't tell the man in the red coat. He watches us at night." That was him. By morning, authorities tracked Raymond Collier's last known location to a trailer outside a scrapyard 40 miles west of Pine Hollow. They moved fast, executing a warrant and searching the property. Inside the trailer were piles of notebooks filled with incoherent ramblings. But one stuck out, pages filled with childlike scrawls and a drawing of the same teal Game Boy. They also found an old map of the Pine Hollow woods, marked with red X's. One of them labeled, "Exit Route, Tunnel B." Back at the farm, Teams combed the woods near the old bunker. Dogs sniffed, metal detectors beeped, drones scanned the terrain. And then, near one of the red XS on the map, they found it. A second hatch. Unlike the first, this one had clearly been used recently. The ground was disturbed. Leaves swept aside. When they pried it open, the air inside was cold and clean. Fresh. Callahan's voice came over the radio. "Get everyone here. Now." Judith and Hank arrived just as officers descended into the new tunnel. A medic climbed out first, face pale. "There's something you need to see." Inside the second chamber was a wall of drawings. Dozens of them. Crayon, pencil, charcoal. Pictures of trees, of two boys building a fort. One showed a woman's face, clearly Judith, smiling with a sun over her head. But in the far corner, on a clean piece of cardboard, was a note in bold black marker. "We made it out. If you're reading this, Mom, we're okay. We had to run. He found us again, headed north, following the railroad tracks. Love, Jake and Eli." Judith gasped. "They're alive," she whispered. "They got out. They're still out there." Callahan looked at her. "This isn't over yet." The news exploded. Boys escaped captivity. Mother now in search of her missing sons who may still be alive. Tips flooded in. People from small towns in northern Vermont and western New Hampshire started calling, saying they saw two boys panhandling, or sleeping in shelters, or riding freight trains. No one was certain, but every report described the same thing. Two boys. One older, protective, one younger, both with the same eyes. Judith packed her bag. She didn't wait for permission. With Hank beside her, she hit the road, chasing the trail that had once gone cold, but now burned bright with hope. Because now, for the first time in 10 years, she wasn't just searching blindly. She was following breadcrumbs. And every breadcrumb was leading her closer to a moment she had dreamed of every single day since her son vanished. The cold air of northern Vermont stung Judith's cheeks as she stepped out of the rental car. The wind carried the scent of pine, wet earth, and something else, something electric. Oh, they had chased rumors for weeks now. The red X on the map had led to the second tunnel. That tunnel led to a trail of sightings. Every call, every blurry photo from a gas station, every hushed tip about two boys who didn't look right for this place, it brought her here. Burke, Vermont. Population 869. It wasn't much, just a diner, a gas station, and an old train line that hadn't seen passengers in years. But Judith didn't need much. She just needed one thing. Her boys. They sat in the diner, hands wrapped around lukewarm coffee. Judith stared out the window, her nerves unraveling. Hank gently rubbed her back. Then the bell above the diner door rang. Judith looked up. Two boys walked in. They were thin, bundled in second-hand coats. The older one scanned the room with protective eyes. The younger one stayed close to his side, holding tightly to a battered backpack. The hostess asked, "Can I help you?" The older one answered, "Just need somewhere warm for a bit. We have a few bucks." That voice. Judith's heart stopped. Jake. She stood slowly, knocking over her coffee cup. The clatter made both boys jump. Jake turned, eyes locking with hers. Confusion clouded his face. Then, recognition. He whispered something to the younger boy. "Eli." Judith stepped forward, tears already flooding her eyes. "Jake," she said, voice trembling. Jake's lip quivered. He blinked fast, like trying to push away a memory he hadn't let himself believe could ever be real. "Mom," Eli gasped. "Mommy." They ran. Judith dropped to her knees just as Jake crashed into her arms. Eli followed, wrapping his little arms around both of them. She sobbed into their hair, holding them like she'd never let go again. People in the diner stared, but no one said a word. No one dared interrupt a miracle. "You found us," Jake cried. "I never stopped," she whispered. "Not for one single day." 3 days later. Authorities confirmed everything. dental records, fingerprints, DNA. The boys were safe. Thin, yes. Bruised by time and trauma. But alive. They spoke in fragments, careful with memories. Jake said they'd escaped 2 years after being taken. That the man in the red coat, Raymond, had tried to move them again but got sloppy. One night, they broke free. They lived in hiding. In old barns. Under porches. At one point, an old woman gave them shelter but never asked questions. They never told anyone their names. Because they knew if they did, the man might find them again. But when Jake saw the Game Boy photo on the news, he knew it was time. That's why he left it at the yard sale. He was trying to send her a message. A breadcrumb. 6 months later. The house in Pine Hollow was quiet again, but now it was filled with something new. Laughter. Jake played music in the living room while Eli built Lego castles by the window. Judith stood at the stove, stirring soup, watching them both with awe. The trauma wasn't gone. Jake still woke up in cold sweats. Eli still panicked at sudden noises. But they were healing. Together. On the wall, above the fireplace, hung a frame. Inside it was the letter Jake had once scribbled in the dark, buried under the floorboards of an old farm. "We'll find you, Mom." And beside it, another note, this one new. Written in bold handwriting on clean paper. She did. Life lesson. Sometimes the world tries to erase you, hide you, make you disappear. But a mother's love is louder than silence, stronger than distance. And even in the darkest places, love leaves breadcrumbs. All you have to do is follow them.